And we're back. This is episode 468 of the Colombia Calling podcast. We are 1 month away from our 10-year anniversary. Our very special guest today is Eric Tabone. You might know him if you've listened to the podcast over the years. He is the founder, creator, director of Bogota Business English. But now we're kind of saying that this is the Free as a Bird podcast episode because Eric has been so successful, he's been able to retire. And so we're going to appeal to all of those out there, all of those of you out there thinking, oh, I'd love to go to Colombia and start up a business and then retire out there because it's such a great place to be. So we're going to hear about how he set up a business, some of the what should you say, obstacles along the way, and what he would have done differently, and hopefully fill this with all sorts of amusing anecdotes. So welcome on the Colombia Calling podcast, Eric.
Richard, hey, how are you? Thanks so much for having me back. Happy to be here and happy to share some stories and kind of share what's happened over the years.
Yeah, last time you were on, we did we went through some funny stories from your wedding in Ocaña, I think.
Yeah, so that was a couple of years ago when I got married. That was in 2014, and Colombian weddings are quite the party. Quite the party.
I recall that there was like a waiter who was stealing cutlery and stuff. I think it was stealing knives and forks. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So we had quite a bit that went missing, but I also remember the party. I think we had planned going to like 2 a.m. and the party ended up finishing like at 8 a.m.
Well, isn't that the way it should be? Isn't that, the celebration to end all celebrations? That's what it should be.
Well, I remember talking to my wife about my fiance at the time when we were planning the wedding. And I just said, as long as we have booze that does not run out and music, nobody else is going to remember what happens. No matter, like, if the food's bad, nobody's going to remember that. If the service is bad, nobody's going to remember. And we had so many people show up. The food was horrible. The service was horrible. But we never ran out of booze, and the music never stopped, and nobody remembers that. So yeah, it was still good memories and a lot of funny stories over there.
And that was just pre-COVID when we talked. I mean, it was just pre-COVID. Things were starting to shut down. But we'll get into that. Tell us, Bogota Business English. How did it come about all those years ago? What, 12 years ago?
Yeah, a little over 12 years ago. So just a slight backstory for those listening. I'm originally from Texas. When I finished university, this was in 2008, I decided to just backpack through Latin America. So I started in Guatemala and made my way all down to Colombia. My goal was to make it to Argentina, but I don't think I realized I didn't have that much money. And I also didn't realize how big Latin America was. And so, yeah, at that time, I just fell in love with Bogota. Went back to the United States, was working for a couple of years, and then came back in 2010 my original goal was just to learn Spanish and see what happens. I was down here, and I was having so much fun. I didn't want to leave. And so I ended up seeing a need in the market and started launching a company. This was in 2011. We started with the name Bogota Business English. That name came out of a night of drinking beers with a bunch of people, and that name just randomly came up. An hour later, I bought the domain. A day later, I put up a website thinking this would be a great practice for me to go get my MBA. And I was going to do this for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Then 12, 13 years later, I'm still here.
And that MBA, it's not come about, or you didn't do it distance or anything?
Never came about. Starting a company, running a company across Colombia and Latin America, I found was a bit more real life than a MBA in the classroom. So I think I learned more than I probably would have in the MBA, but we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, I think you probably did. The hands-on experience of cutting your teeth in business in Latin America is something I think a lot of people dream of. That nice idea of okay, let's leave the US, let's leave the UK, Europe, or whatever. It'll be so much easier. That I want that quality of life. And I think there are elements of truth, of course, the quality of life type thing, but the ease of setting up a business, you are now, as again I said, the gentleman of leisure. You have been posting on LinkedIn sort of about things you wish you'd done differently and things you wish you'd known beforehand. So let's start. Let's start going through this. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the early days, but you started up. It was bootstrapping. It was working out of your apartment. How quickly did the business take off?
Yeah, so I mean, just kind of going back, it was 2011 that we started, and first couple of years, it was just me. I was so BBE. We're now called BBE languages because we weren't working just in Bogota. And just a side note, I found that selling Bogota business English in Medellin or in other countries across Latin America wasn't well received. So we ended up doing a rebranding a couple of years ago. We just go by the name of BBE. So first couple of years with BBE, the first few years I was teaching, I was cleaning the toilets, I was the CEO, I was the finance director, everything you could think of, one way of doing it. And I never, once again, ever expected things to really take off. So the first couple of years, it was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but definitely a lot of fun. And it was probably 2014 when things started to pick up. We had the first couple of years we were working mostly just with individuals, and I was just going down a trip down memory lane. Some of the individuals we actually worked with in those early days, which you might recognize these names. Alejandro Gaviria was one of our students for a while.
Gaviria, presidential hopeful, former minister of education.
Oh yeah, all over. So at the time, he was the dean of the Los Andes, and he spoke perfect English. He just needed some practice. And I remember he was working with somebody on my team. I just went by one day, just introduced myself, and he was the nicest guy in the world at the time. And so that was pretty interesting. And then somebody else that anybody who follows any Colombian shows might recognize the name is Laura Lodoño.
And I don't know. So who's that?
She's the famous Colombian actress. She was in the what was that, Café con Amor or something like that? That's her most recent one.
Amor con aroma de café?
Yeah, or something like that.
One of those telenovelas.
Yeah, and so I mean, the first couple of years we had these random people, and I didn't even know who she was until like a few years later. And then and yeah, I spoke to her on the phone, and once again, these were like the nicest people in the world. No matter what's going on today or where they are, it was just such a pleasure working with them. 2014, 2015 was when things started to take off. And I remember probably the most important phone call I ever received was Christmas Eve 2015, and it was when we were awarded my company BB at the time. We were awarded a quite large contract to work in an insurance company, and I had been working on that sale, for about 2 years. Patience obviously is key with a lot of sales, and the person called me Christmas Eve, maybe 5 p.m. I was getting ready to go out and celebrate with my in-laws, and we won the contract. And so from there, things just started to fall in, because once you get your first major client, people start to trust you and move in. And over the years, just things kind of started to get bigger and bigger. We started off, with contracts, 50 people, 100 people, and soon we're doing contracts working with 500,000 students across Colombia, Latin America. And it's just kind of, we had roller coaster moments with it. But yeah, I would say 2015 is kind of when things started to come together and things started to make sense, and I realized this was an actual viable business idea.
So, but yeah, okay. So a couple of years in, and you got that huge contract, the insurance. I mean, was that down to just hardcore networking, rubbing shoulders everywhere you needed to be, talking to the right people, or was it just knocking on the door and insisting?
Yeah, mixture of both. First couple of years, I was doing a lot of networking, and even now I still love networking. In Latin America, Colombia, Bogota, no matter where you are, at the end of the day, it comes down to who you know, and those doors are open. And so that one, it was actually that went through cold call prospecting at the time, but then obviously that relationship was built while we were working on the sales pipeline, just trying to help them solve their challenge they had, and that coming through was huge. And networking it's completely vital here.
So you need networking. You need to not be an introvert and also have an incredible constitution for your liver.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I have a lot of funny stories about just randomly meeting somebody at the bar or some type of networking event and being able to manage that. Obviously networking I also found really interesting. I'd go and have a beer or two, and there'd always be the one individual who couldn't control their liquor or something at a networking event, and you can imagine how that went from there. Somebody who's trying to network and they're drunk off their ass, slurring words. So obviously, make sure you're responsible when you do that. But yeah, I mean, networking is huge, and that's something I've been doing since I got down here, and thankfully, it's something that's always has come very natural to me, and I've always really enjoyed because it's fun meeting different people from different walks of life, and never really having an agenda, but just getting to talk to people.
Well, I think rather than
in a
making
relation.
the sales pitch, a lot of times just talking to people is even better, isn't it? It's like, oh, he was a good guy. Oh, he's got a business. It's like,
Yeah. I mean, talking to people, but I think when it comes to what we were doing, we were offering a solution to a challenge that a lot of organizations had. Training up their teams and having the second language needs, but we were able to offer a solution to their biggest headache. And so when I look at sales and marketing, I've always said that you don't have to sell anything; you just have to solve their problem or their challenge. And as soon as you do that, you become the savior. And there's no sales going behind that. And a lot of people miss that around Latin America, even in the United States, and even still, I get cold called all the time from random organizations, and it's hilarious. They'll like the most common cold calls or cold messages I get. We do IT and web development.
mm,
Can I get a 30-minute meeting? I'm like, no, I don't know who you are. I don't
yeah.
know what challenge you're solving or anything, but just break it down. Solve their biggest challenges, and you're no longer selling. You're just helping them out when they need it.
Do you do you get the same? This is kind of tangential here, but do you get the same level of cold calling if you're in the US? Because I can say in the UK when I'm there for an extended period of time, I
Yeah,
don't get that, but here it's all the time, and it's bad cold calling. I mean,
yeah. Well, when I'm in the U.S., I haven't been there the past 12 years, but if I'm
mm,
even there for a week or two, I do get it, and it tends to be a lot of the same sectors, different things like that. One thing I've noticed that's really different regarding cold calling or cold messaging or
mm,
prospecting with LinkedIn. In Colombia, I'll uh, I'll get pretty horrible outreaches within Colombia, Latin America, and these
yeah,
random messages that are put together trying to get a meeting,
yeah,
and they have no idea how the sales process works. In the US, it tends to be a bit more tactical or with a
yeah.
bit more strategy. I'm not going to say it's any better, but they'll have a bit more strategy, and people try to build up conversations or things like that. And they try to show that trust before they actually get the meeting. So I do find a difference with that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, cold calling, it is what it is. I mean, I hate to say it. It's always going to be a part of business, whether you like it
Yeah.
or not. And if you're going to start a business, you always have to be willing to do it.
So on that, do you get? I mean, because I think the cold calling, cold messaging, I get messages on Instagram as well, asking me to be like an influencer for something. Previously, it was always because there were pictures of my dog. I don't know how the algorithms work because I'm now getting a bunch about like
Feet photos, selling photos of their feet.
no, 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 like pubic hair care and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I haven't gotten that. I get a lot. I get Instagram. I don't get that much because I'm not that active. But every now and then I'll be like, I'll get something. Check out my OnlyFans and see photos of my feet. Like this is so strange. This is so
It's
strange. I
weird, isn't
guess.
it? But I don't know. I mean, how do the algorithms work that they think that? Well, I mean, well, I don't. Let's not get into this now. What I need is
Well,
some trimming downstairs.
I just finished a book called Stealing Your Focus. Not sure if you heard about it, but talking
No.
about how the IT companies are moving away, like with Instagram and things like that, how the algorithms are programmed,
Mm,
and it makes perfect sense. We know this, but their job is to keep people as active as possible on the platform, and so yeah, the algorithms. I don't even know, but that's how oftentimes people will contact you. That's why there's also what they call the infinite scroll. And somebody can sit down and be scrolling on Instagram for 3 hours and not even realize what's happening. So
Okay. Well, we are okay. I think we've gone down a digression here on this one, but I
yeah,
think
let's get back.
the first things we've covered really, in your business world here, relationships are key.
Yep.
The networking. What I mean, on your LinkedIn you put 5 points, and we can go through each one. The second one is don't underestimate a good lawyer. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
really important. Now, I don't know if we can talk about it, but did some of your employees make trouble for you?
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of yeah. I could talk about most of things these days. So I remember when I started the company, I tried starting a company by myself, thinking I could save a couple $100s on legal fees, and it ended up costing me a couple $1,000s. I mean, at the time, a couple $1,000s was like my entire net worth. So you could imagine the feeling I had when that happened. But so I didn't really understand how much a good lawyer, a good accountant was worth. And I've gone through a lot of lawyers over the years. I always find that lawyers oftentimes try to make things a bit more complicated than it actually is. So I learned how to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, first couple of years I had a couple of issues. I remember with one of the funnier stories I have is with Migracion, which it used to be DAS. And so for long-term listeners of the show, they might remember that DAS used to be the agency that did all the visa control, among other things.
Yeah.
And before they changed it, I got shaken down by a DAS agent in a McDonald's for visa irregulars, and yeah, that was a pretty interesting one. And it was just there was it's because a lawyer didn't know how to do visas at the time, and so the guy found out about it. And for those listening, this does not happen now. This was back 12 years ago when it was DAS and they were the spy ring, and the guy saw me as a young kid who made a mistake. He thought he could get some money out of me, but I had no idea he was trying to shake me down. I didn't even realize till like a couple months after that he was trying to get money. At the time I didn't realize, like, oh, I thought it was normal for me to go meet with government officials in McDonald's and have an ice cream and not in their office. So yeah, I mean, things like that happen. It wasn't even having to do with employees. It was just having to do with the fact that I didn't have the right lawyers at the time. Just doing a couple of very simple things.
Yeah.
With that.
Being shaken down. I mean, again, you went into you were entirely naive about this, so therefore you weren't concerned or whatever. So you were under observation then, and he came in and decided to collar you in McDonald's.
So I'm trying to think that specific situation. We got audited, which audits were quite normal, but there was if I vaguely remember that had something to do with like your reporting. And so the way visas work now, when you get your visa, you have to report via a system called CIRE. But back then, this was before the DAS or Migracion even had computers, and 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 so you would have to send in a letter giving all the specific information. Well, we were doing the letters, but we were forgetting, I don't know, something so minuscule nobody would even think to do.
Yeah.
And he decided to try to get me on that. He's like, well, we have 100 situations on where this happened. I'm like, oh no, what do we do? I'm so sorry. I mean, how can I fix this? He's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I could help you. I'm like, cool. How do you help me? Do you want me to resend it? He's like, well, no, it's a bit more serious than this. I mean, this is like going to be a lot of money. I'm like, oh no, I'm so sorry. Okay. And I just thought, like, I didn't realize he was trying to ask for money at the time. And once again, everybody who's listening, this does not happen anymore. This was the spy ring, and there's a reason why they dissolved it, among many things. Okay. And it took me a couple months to figure it out. And I mean, he's in jail now, not because of me, but for a completely different other situation.
Oh, you followed his career.
Yeah, he was the guy. He was part of the spy ring doing the calls against journalists in 2008 and 2009.
Yeah, I know the guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you got all those calls all the time. Yeah, really nice guy.
Oh,
really nice guy.
Okay,
yeah,
we'll not name him just in case. But I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that naivety played you very well indeed. And then if we go to point number 3, you said patience is key. Yes. As a small business owner, I've now got patience when I'm working locally. my patients can fit in an aircraft hangar. I mean,
oh yeah.
I don't know what, I mean, is it for you when you were thinking about contracts or taxes or what really do you mean when you say
Well, good on
patient?
you. Good on you if you developed the patience. That was something I never really developed, and it caused a lot of frustrations along the way. Yeah, but I just I mean, everything around Latin America, and I keep saying Latin America because my company, we were based in Bogota, but we were working across Latin America.
Hmm.
Just how, sales pipelines would go through, just how we would have to do any type of documentation with Dion or tax agency or Cámara de Comercio, different things like that. I mean, even recently when I was leaving my company, I had to change like the I don't know how the representante legal, the person who
Ah,
could go on
yeah,
official
yeah.
signing. And I mean, I go to the Cámara de Comercio and I pass them the actors or things like that. And they approve it, but then they realize that they made a mistake. And so then I had to go back and redo it so that person didn't get in trouble. So it took me 4 days to do something that should
Hmm.
have been online. But it is what it is, and that's Latin America. And patience at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Uh, how to be more successful than I was, I was never able to really develop that patience. Like I said, it caused me a lot of heartache and frustrations. But for the most successful people here, I see are able to really manage that patience and just work with it and laugh it off.
Well, yeah, I've learned to laugh. There are things that I expect to be done well now that, so, I've got employees that I've had in for 12 odd years and so on. I don't expect them to be making the same errors on administrative or bureaucratic issues that we've been working on for 12 years. That's where my
Right.
patience runs thin. My patience also runs thin when, for example, if you're in the Cámara de Comercio or the Chamber of Commerce or in the DIAN, and they make a mistake that then costs me more time. That's where I
Oh
say,
yeah.
that for me is, and that would be anywhere in the world. That's the other thing. Anywhere is just like, I've come down here with every good intention. You've made the error, and this is
Oh
what,
yeah.
that's, and I'm, when I make the error, I'm the first to say and apologize and try and resolve it. I think that's, but when it's flipped back, and I think this feeds into the next thing, which is the cultural identification being vital. And I think,
Yeah.
I am a Brit, I am from elsewhere, I am a guest here, and so I do laugh off a lot, and I do, like you said, it is what it is. Things
Yeah.
do work differently, and I appreciate that, and for that reason I'm
Oh
here.
yeah. Yeah, I find yeah, you're completely right. But I also find my patience with utility companies
Oh,
or telecommunication, like Claro, I think is the worst.
it's
I
worse.
remember, yeah, like what was it, 2015? I mean, back then, so like cell phones and all this internet data, I would always say was always about 5 years behind what was happening in the United States. And so this was probably 2014, 15. We had to get Claro installed, or I went down or something like that. And we only used the landlines to receive calls
Mm,
because the cell phones weren't as common or as utilized as we do today. So now it wouldn't matter. But it was landlines and internet, and our internet went down, and the Collado guy came over and he's like, all right, so I fix it. It'll be up in 2 days. Can you please sign saying I did my job? I'm like, no.
no.
He's like, well, I got to get you another service. I said, I don't care. I need internet and I'm paying you for the internet. He's like, well, I'm leaving. And I went and locked the door and I said, I'll open the door when you give me internet. And so then he sits on the ground. He's like, you're kidnapping me. I'm going to call the police. I'm like, call the police. With what? You don't have a phone line. Get us down. But we had no joke. After that, 5 minutes later, we
Yeah,
had it back up. He just didn't
yeah,
want to do it.
yeah. Now,
And
you
yeah.
are not the only person I know who's locked a Claro engineer in a room. You are
Yeah.
the second person I know. Listeners, it wasn't me. I have a friend from the Czech Republic who has an apartment downtown, and he was renting it. And Claro came in, and they went through all the wires, and they went through everything, and they went, well, the whole building gets internet apart from your apartment. So he
And he just thought, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so he
But that,
said, he walked out and he locked the door, and it has one of those sort of misted windows by the door. And there's apparently the Claro engineer is knocking on it going, please let me out. He goes, no, not until I get internet, not until you connect it. If you have to run a wire up and round and over, I'll pay for it, but not until I get internet. So apparently the guy did
Oh
it.
yeah. Oh yeah. It's amazing. And even still, like if you call them today, this is 2023, and it takes them 3 weeks to come out or actually do something. It's unbelievable that a company that is so bad as Claro, they've been able to get as big as they are. Sorry, Carlos Sims. I'm sure Carlos Sims is listening right now, but
I doubt it. I doubt it. It would be highly flattering.
Mr. Sims, get it going.
Yeah,
get your company working.
Sort it out. But then that brings in, we talk, this is cultural identification, things like that. When I think about it, you got to relax about these things. And it's like the conversations, isn't it? You don't get into business ever at the beginning of a conversation. It's always, even people you don't know. How's the family? How's the kids? Oh, isn't the weather great? The government is awful.
I had a simple tip that I use for most meetings, and I brought this up more as a joke, but it's actually pretty truthful. If you have a 1 hour meeting, I would say usually the first 55 minutes are just chatting with people, and then you'll do 1 minute of business and then 4 minutes of closing. But that's fun. See, I actually enjoy that. Yeah. I enjoy that.
It makes it more human, in my opinion. It makes it a bit more, you get to know the person you're working with, which is always a good thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and you build those relationships, and those relationships last. I mean, it's pretty interesting to see all these relationships I've built over the years. A lot of these individuals have gone off to do other things, and so when you look at your network that you build from professional, but there's more personal stories that go with that instead of professional, and that's key in that in America.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge bonus, and I think. You wanted to put number 5, the banking system is horrible. I don't think we need to talk particularly about that. It's the most incredibly inefficient and costly.
It's so bad.
I've ever.
It is so bad.
What amazes me is everything is, you can do most things online apart from almost outside of business hours. You're trying to do something outside of business hours, the online thing. There's in some banks, the online platform doesn't work. And you're just like, well, what that takes away the whole, efficiency of online. But I don't want to, the costs of banking, the complications of banking.
It's a disaster.
We've been over it 1 billion times. We've mentioned it. I think that to people thinking of setting up a business, you're just going to have to face it. You're just going to have to get an accountant and do it, because there's a reason these people are experts.
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, well, the good news is I do see light at the end of the tunnel. There has been a lot of fintech innovations that are happening. So things are, in the past year, I've seen more changes than I have in the previous 11 years. So there is quite a bit of hope. Yeah. But when I was starting my company, this was 2011. I remember I went to go try to open a savings account. I wasn't even asking for them to give me money. I said, here, let me give you this cash. Yeah. And they denied me in 2011 because they thought I was too big of a risk. And I'm like, what? I'm giving you money. But like I said,
you're a risk. You're probably bringing, I don't know, the equivalent of, a couple of $1,000 to open an account.
No, not even. Maybe $300, if that. Like it was nothing. It was just like, here, just let me give you this so people can send money when they buy our services. And we had all the legal incorporation, all the tax documents and everything. They still wouldn't do it. Listeners, like I said, this was 12 years ago. Yeah. There's things that in the past year I've seen more innovation than I have in the previous 11. So
around that time ago, I got called in. I had to go into the bank because my transfer of around £2,000 was blocked for fear of money laundering.
Oh yeah. What year did you open your company?
2008.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. But so, I mean, like £2,000 money laundering. Me, look at my credit history. Look at this. You guys are running however much money out of Venezuela into buildings here, and you're calling up me.
Well, if you were money laundering with £2,000, you're not that good at money laundering, is what I would say.
And I was just like, also when they said it was in Monpos, and I'm like, if I'm money laundering, I wouldn't be doing it here. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be doing. I'd be in Cartagena or Barranquilla or anywhere else where you can sort of, make it fly. But that thing said, these are a bit of negatives and stuff. But this is a land of opportunity. Everything can be done here. There is everything to do.
Yeah, completely. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I stayed. So, like back past 12 years, I just saw an opportunity and I ran with it. Um, and every day I see so much going on and so much potential. It's a cool place. It's a cool place to
Yeah.
live. That's why I'm still here. That's why you're still here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great country. It's a beautiful country. The people are great. Yeah, there are challenges, but there are a lot of opportunities. There's a lot going on, and it's just exponential. Every single day, I see what's happening and the innovation that's going on. It's mind blowing what
Yeah.
I've seen over these past couple of months, and what's being developed for companies across
Yeah.
Latin America and in Colombia.
Yeah. Would you? I mean, if you were to say, listen. Now that you're again a gentleman of leisure, you're a boulevardier, you like long lunches and so on. But would you say, good opportunities here, tech companies, import, export? What would you kind of say?
Well, I'm not fully retired just yet, as much as I wish I was. But
you're younger than me, right? You're quite a bit younger than me, and you're retired.
I'm not retired. I'm taking some time off to have long lunches with you and talk about Colombia.
Hang on a second. There's a name for it. It's called a sabbatical.
A sabbatical. There we go. I'm on a sabbatical. Opportunity. Some of the more interesting things I've seen recently is nearshore services.
Yeah, lots of
and
that.
this is because what's happening, especially in the United States and in Canada, there's a shortage of labor with a lot of the jobs that, lower paying jobs. And so a lot of nearshore companies have been popping up because the talent in Colombia in Latin America is really high. Very, very, very educated. There's a lot of people who do speak English as well as a third language. So nearshoring is popping up. I've been seeing quite a bit. Obviously any types of companies that are centered around, services. So if you think about IT development, to hire an IT developer in the States, you're looking at $150 an hour. In Colombia, you could be paid $50 an hour, which is a phenomenal wage here in Colombia. And it's just getting clients worldwide a bit more bang for their buck. So that's been really interesting.
Yeah.
Obviously there's so many sectors that are moving. Fintech, when we go back to the banking, I think so much is going on with fintech and what's happening with financial companies that are starting just to make things easier. And it makes me so happy that they're finally knocking on the doors of the big banks, and they're slowly starting to feel it. And so
this is like totally online banking and stuff, fintech things.
Yeah, totally online banking. In Brazil, they have a lot of that going on because in Brazil it's even more complicated. But there's so many different things that are being offered. There's some awesome ways that companies can now sync expenses across Latin America. One of the more interesting ideas I saw recently was Jeeves. I don't know if you've heard of it. I have no relation with them, so this is no promo or anything, but I just think it's a really cool idea. It's like tryjeeves.com, and it's just pretty much allowing you to pay for expenses in the country where you have it with a credit card, but you could pay funds from the US or any other country. So it just facilitates expense management across Latin America. And it's a simple idea, but nobody's doing it. And things like that get me pretty excited.
I mean, that's quite exciting. I know of someone who's a lawyer here in Colombia, again, professional, hired a team of other lawyers and is doing the nearshoring for Atlanta's parking system.
Oh, cool.
I mean, that's cool, isn't it? And so they get paid in Colombia, but US wages. I'm sure it's lower than what they would pay people in the US, insurance and everything else. And I mean, everybody's awesome. Happy.
I came across a company recently, and I didn't even know this existed, but outsourcing architectural designs to Colombia.
Really?
And I didn't even know you could do that. And this shows how little I know about engineering and architecture. But he has a firm of 20-something architects. And so when these architectural companies need to build out plans, they could send work down to Colombia half the cost. Wages in Colombia, they're receiving quite a bit more than they would anywhere else. And so it's a win-win situation. So yeah, things like that get me pretty excited. And there's a lot going on.
So, I mean, I think, are you doing some consulting then in your spare time?
Yeah, so as much as I wish I was retired, I'm not. So I started retirement, and after a day, I was bored out of my mind. I think I think I saw you in that little transition when I was bored out of my mind, and working for as long as I did, and for past 12 years, 50, 60 hour weeks. I
Mm.
found it very hard to slow down. So I've been, since then, I started doing some consulting, which is also just really interesting, just helping companies or individuals figure out how to come into Latin America, optimize revenue, their revenue generating machine. So how
Mm.
do you seek sales, marketing, service, things like that. And
Mm.
I just find that fascinating because I'm able to go into organizations and I always just say, what is your biggest headache? And I go help them solve it.
Yeah, nice. So hang on. It sounds like some of my listeners might be interested in contracting you. How can they get in touch?
Great. Find me on LinkedIn, Eric with a C, or Tabone, or Tabone, however you want to say it. If you're speaking English, Spanish, or French, just look for me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Eric Tabone in Latin America, and I'm the my LinkedIn picture is a ugly bald guy. So just look for the ugly bald guy, and that's me.
Do we equate your male pattern baldness to the stress of opening a business and running it for 12 years, 60-hour weeks?
I wish I could say that was the case. Yeah, sure, sure. Let's blame it on that. Let's not blame it on my genetics. Yeah, let's just go with the stress. So
Well, listen, it's been fun because honestly, I think at the end of it, the main thing we take away is obviously there are challenges, but there are challenges everywhere. And that's it. And this is a land of opportunity. You come down, you take, test the water, see what's missing, see how to open up something, create jobs, make a life for yourself. I mean, you're married, you got a daughter. I'm married, I got two sons. They've been here however
yeah,
many years, not going anywhere. It's a good thing.
yeah, it's great. I always go back. Like I still say, but I'm very grateful to have traveled quite a bit over the world. I still love Bogota. I think it's a
Yeah.
great place to be. There's always pros and cons.
Yeah.
But yeah, starting a company on here, it's a lot of work, but it was also really rewarding. And
Yeah.
there's always opportunities. There's more opportunities in Latin America that I see on a daily basis compared to other areas of the world, which that gets pretty exciting.
That's what I think too, and I firmly believe it. And if I had some of this sort of seed cash, I'd be doing other things as well. Hang on, before we go, um,
Yeah.
to allow yourself to get into this very enviable situation, I think you found an investor, right?
Yeah. So we did a part of it. So part of I'm still one of the owners of the company, but we actually put a management in place. And when we go back to networking, that's a good story. Networking. It was just one day I just randomly walked into the Irish pub because I'd finished and I went into the pub to have a beer and do some work. And I just ran into a guy, and next thing we know, we were signing an NDA, and it got a phenomenal partner who came on board, who helped me put the management team in place. And so at the end of the day, it's all about getting out there and talking to people. It's about building those relationships and just trying to figure out where synergies lie, rather than just sell something just to sell. Just figure out where those connections and make that work.
I think the most important detail there is what kind of time do you have to go into the Irish pub to find an investor?
I think at that time I probably went in at 1 p.m. So it was a bit on the earlier side, but hey, it shows that having a beer or whiskey at 1 or 2 p.m. does have its advantages.
There you go. And one beer turned into another, and then it turned into this enviable situation that you find yourself in. So, listen, my hat is off to you, Eric. You've done an amazing job. I mean, imagine having like the former Minister of Health and then latterly the former Minister of Education as one of your first clients. I mean, you were
Yeah,
destined for great things, of course, but
yeah.
I hope that your consulting continues and that you're able to fill some of those hours in the day so you don't get too bored and start like a topiary business or growing
Yeah.
mushrooms or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, well, thanks, Richard. Yeah, it's been, like I said, a lot of fun. And for those listeners who are thinking about, starting a company or anything like that, feel free to get in contact. I love meeting new people, talking new ideas. And remember, Richard is also a great source. He has several successful companies here. So between us, hopefully one of us could put listeners in the right direction.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you to say so. Sometimes I don't feel it's very successful, but other times I reflect and say, yeah, you know what? It's really good. But anyhow, so we've been talking to Eric Tabone or Eric Tabone. Find him on LinkedIn. Get in touch with him. Don't cold call him. Actually introduce yourself and say what's going on. Don't and you know, he will get back in touch. Of course he will, and because he likes long lunches and meeting people and so on. So this has been a great episode 468 of the Colombia Calling podcast. It's been fun to chat to Eric over there, you know, take some of the monotony out of his day. And of course, thank you for everyone for listening. I know you enjoyed last week's episode with Sergio Guzman and Sara Torres from Colombia Risk Analysis, talking about Chinese investments in Colombia. Very interesting indeed. Of course, you can support us on patreon.com. That's www.patreon.com/Colombia Calling. And for those who don't know, I am now the host of another podcast called the Latin News Podcast. You can find the website, thelatinNewspodcast.com. And there's links there to Spotify, Google, YouTube, and so on. And we talk about political events taking place in the region of the Americas. We've covered Chile, Peru, and Brazil. And next up will be Paraguay, given the recent presidential elections there. So thank you for listening. Get in touch with Eric Tabone. Check out BBE English. So Bogota British English, but they rebranded BBE. What's the website, Eric?
BBElanguages.com. So if anybody needs to learn English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, or need second language consulting, get in touch with my old company. There's a great team managing it, and they'll be able to help you guys out.
Perfect. So thank you again for listening, everyone. We're signing off for this week. We'll be back next week. Of course, continue to recommend people or subjects that you wish to hear about here on the Colombia Calling podcast, and we will do our best. But thank you for listening, everyone, and goodbye.